So we've seen how research is a bridge between the theoretical pole and the empirical pole, and how research is in fact theory-driven. In this set, or in this page, I shall expound again on the understanding that research is in fact something that's theory-driven, but also that it manifests critical praxis. What does it mean that research is in fact an application of one's critical thinking? I'd say the parts of research, or the parts of the research process that we're involved in, are actually responses to questions, and that these questions will necessitate an action and then a specific output. So first, I'd like us to look at the question first, no? And a research process, or I'd suggest the research process begins with the question, what's up? No, what's up? And when somebody asks you what's up, that's basically asking you to describe what the problem situation is. And of course, when you describe the problem situation, there are many ways to do this one, but the suggested way is that you begin from a global perspective, and then at least until it manifests in the local one. So go global, as we've always said. And that would mean citing newspaper articles, citing reports, and things like that about what the problem situation is. When you look at these, when you describe the problem situation, you're actually creating the urgency for your research, no? And that's very important, I think, no? Which leads you to the question, if that's a problem, what do you think, no? What do you think about it? And that would mean theorizing based on assumption. Maybe it's like these because I've read that there's an article that said it's like this, or in another text I've read these or that, which basically means, yes, I will theorize, but I will theorize based on existing literature. Of course, not all literature are of the same value, and I will even explain that, because there is a hierarchy to the literature that we lay down. And when we say there's a hierarchy to the literature that we lay down, that's my way of basically saying not all literature are the same, no? Some literatures are more preferred than the rest, and because of that, you see now different variations as to how we should recognize or even affirm some literature. Now, theorizing based on assumption, therefore, means I don't simply accept it because someone told me, but I have to cross-check, corroborate it with literature, no? So that if there's one literature that's saying this is what's going on here, it compels me, propels me even on the one hand to cross-check, are the other literatures agreeing with this literature, or maybe not, no? After I have theorized based on the assumptions, no, by simply saying, siguro ganito, or maybe it's like that, no, I need to confront myself. If that's the explanation to this problem, how sure am I that that's really the explanation? And in order for me to be sure that that's really a feasible explanation of the problem situation, then I have to verify, or better yet, test, or even validate theory, no? Verify, test, or validate theory, which basically means I have to see, no, are the circumstances of this paper the same as the one in the local, no, or in the empirical, or maybe not. Once I verify theory, I can ask, ano ngayon? So what? No? So what if that's what, if you verified it to be true? So what? Based on that, I can say, well, I validated it and my findings is in agreement with these findings, or is in disagreement with these findings, or is contrary to common understanding. When you look at it from that perspective, you realize that validation basically leads us to consider how our findings are either in agreement or in disagreement with certain findings, no, with what we have discovered. And that's also very important. You have to understand, no, it's very important for us to see how our findings are in agreement or in disagreement with our with the existing literature. Now, realizing, for example, that our claims are in disagreement with other literature doesn't mean that our findings are invalid. No, that's not always the case. Sometimes it actually is very important to recognize how particular findings run contrary established ones, and that can mean, no, the development of a new research, not always a failure of research. So please take note of that. Once we corroborate findings and recognize how it fares with other literature, we can now ask, what now? No? What now? What now if it's in agreement? What now if it's in disagreement? Then we can synthesize and generalize, where the synthesis and the generalization are actually responses to the questions that we have raised. No? So take note, no? You conduct the research not to discover only nuances, no? That's part of it for sure, but you conduct research to specifically answer questions, problems. And then after you have synthesized and generalized, and then we can ask what then we can recommend actions and then propose interventions. Maybe we can do this, or maybe we can do that. No, of course, recommend actions and interventions can be part of the research question, that can constitute the research question. Very much, that's true. But you need to understand also that recommend actions and interventions will address a different part, no, a different part of the research process. And what it addresses more specifically are in fact the more concrete and specific recommendations, no. Well, the entire study, no, remember we've always said describe, evaluate, and then prescribe. The prescription can be a recommendation of action, but how is that different from the recommendations after the conclusion? We will see as we move forward. Also, no, because there's also a recommendation there. So these questions, when you ask what's up, no, and you describe the problem situation, that will produce what is now known as the background of the study. And when you theorize based on your assumptions, that's actually what other people call theoretical framework, if you're using one theory alone. Conceptual framework, if you're putting together 2 or 3 different theories. So that's the distinction between a theoretical and a conceptual framework. Very quickly, theoretical framework, I'm just getting one theory and using it. Like in the examples that I provided earlier, no, the fact that I'm using only Goldman tells you I'm using a theoretical framework because I'm just using one framework. But if I'm going to combine Lewis and Goldman just to create a more exhaustive leadership style, then I'm creating a theoretical framework because I'm really constructing something that's not there. Conceptualization, no? To give birth to a framework that's not there. No, but theorizing based on assumptions is also your review of literature. No, when you verify theory, of course, that will be your problem. The development of the hypothesis, and even research design. No? So when you look at it from this perspective, that will also tell you the directions that we will take as we lay down to you the steps for writing. First, we look at what the problem is, what are your problem and things like that. And then you'd recognize there are problems that are not researchable. There are problems that are researchable. And that's basically because not everything can be subjected to the scientific method. But just immediately after you have understood the problem or comprehended the problem, you jump immediately to the review of related literature. And it is the review of related literature that can provide you with the parts or aspects of your research problem. No? Once you're done with the articulation of the problem, and that's really a pendulum, no? You're moving from the review of related literature to the statement of the problem, back again to the RRL, back to the statement of the problem. And in that pendulum, you are not only able to articulate your statement of the problem, you're also able to articulate your hypothesis, which is in fact your intelligent response or your library research response to your statement of the problem. It's very important to pay attention to this because many students ask questions they totally don't know the answers of. And we've always said this, write with intention, not with chance. No. Now, of course, the play between the problem, the RRL, the hypothesis will also allow us to clarify what am I doing with the variables that I have. No, I mentioned a new name now, variables, but you will see this more and more as we move forward. No, concepts or variables that will determine the design, and also the design will actually allow me to understand what data I can gather and the limitations of the analysis I can employ. And I'll repeat that. The problem, the hypothesis, the design, all will limit what type of answers or even analysis that can be employed or can be involved in the study. When I corroborate findings, then that's back to my RRL. But in fact, we've already also mentioned that the analysis of data, remember in the previous slide, is also something that will employ or will necessitate going back to the RRL, no, corroboration. But and then after you analyze and then back to the RRL and present your data, then you can now draw your conclusions, and you just need to make sure that the conclusion responds to the problems that were raised, right? That the conclusions is an answer to the problem situation. And then recommend actions are actually your recommendation. If you look at it from that from this perspective, you'd realize that there are certain questions that you need to ask, and that these certain questions will bring about certain tasks, and that these tasks will actually constitute an output, and that this output will play a very important role in your research paper. I hope I clarified how research is a critical praxis that way. Thank you very much.